Hey everyone, I'm your host, Peter Zablocki, and you're listening to History Shorts. I hope everyone's having a great day so far, and thank you for making this show a small part of that. If you'd like to help me out with a small gesture, please leave History Shorts a rating or a review, and click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. For sources and books used as the basis for these episodes, how to advertise on a show, and other information such as a list of our upcoming guests on the conversation series, or a link to our Patreon account where you can listen to exclusive episodes not heard here, please visit www.historyshortspodcast.com. You could also always email me at peter@historyshortspodcast.com. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate podcast listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now and take your podcast experience to the next level. Having said all of that, few cities in modern history have been so hotly contested, so culturally layered, and so emblematic of shifting empires as the city once known as Danzig, today's Gdańsk, Poland. Situated on the Baltic Sea at the mouth of the Vistula River, Danzig has always been a place of crossroads, a melting pot of Polish merchants, German burghers, Prussian kings, and Hanseatic traders. But in the interwar years of the 20th century, it stood for something even more extraordinary, an independent quasi-nation, a free city born from the ashes of World War I, caught between national aspirations and geopolitical chess games. And it was here, on September 1st, 1939, that the first shots of World War II were fired, because of and in this fragile experiment in international diplomacy. Here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The origins of the free city of Danzig lie in the upheaval that followed World War I. When the guns fell silent in 1918, the Treaty of Versailles sought to redraw the borders of Europe to punish aggressors, reward victors, and theoretically establish peace forever. For Poland, erased from maps for 123 years, Versailles was a rebirth. The new republic was to be re-established with access to the sea, a corridor to the Baltic. But the problem was geography. The bustling strategic port city of Danzig was historically German-speaking, but ethnically and economically tied to Poland. Simply handing it to Warsaw risked enraging the defeated Germans and destabilizing the entire Baltic region. The solution was a compromise that satisfied, no one. In 1920, the League of Nations declared Danzig a free city, a self-governing, semi-sovereign city-state under the League's own protection, but economically tied it to Poland. It would not belong to Poland or Germany outright. It would mint its own currency, fly its own flag, field its own police, and operate its own parliament, or the Volkstag. But Poland retained control of its customs, postal system, foreign affairs, and crucially, its right to use the port and place military installations nearby. It was a balancing act performed on a knife's edge, you might say. In other words, Poland's only access to the Baltic Sea was through this city that was neither Polish nor German, but at the same time belonged culturally and economically to both. The new free city had a population of about 400,000 people, overwhelmingly ethnic Germans, but with a significant Polish minority, roughly 10%. Its creation was met with resentment from both sides, as you can imagine. Germans saw it as an unjust punishment and national humiliation, where a city was taken away just because it lay on the Baltic Sea to become an access point of New Poland to get to that sea. Poles, however, saw it as an artificial barrier to full sovereignty. Inside Danzig itself, tensions simmered. The Polish community faced harassment. Germans, meanwhile, rallied around nationalist parties, many of which sought reunification with the German Reich. Into this fragile ecosystem stepped a series of League-appointed high commissioners, diplomats tasked with keeping peace, acting as referees, you might say, between Danzig and Poland. Despite its complexities, the Free City initially flourished. The port of Danzig became one of the busiest in the Baltic. Trade flowed along the Vistula River into the heart of Poland. The city retained much of its architectural splendor. Baroque facades, Gothic churches, and narrow merchant houses standing as reminders of once great wealth and multiculturalism. It had its own postage stamps, passports, and even Olympic athletes. For a brief time, Danzig stood as an experiment in international governance. Flawed, but functional. But then in the 1930s, storm clouds gathered. The rise of Adolf Hitler in Germany sent shockwaves across Europe. None felt it more than Danzig. Nazi ideology found fertile ground in the city's ethnic German population, many of whom felt alienated by Polish economic policy and inspired by dreams of national unification. In 1933, the Nazi Party of Danzig won elections to the Volkstag. Over the next few years, the city-state was effectively Nazified. Opposition parties were banned, Jews were persecuted, and Polish institutions were harassed. The League of Nations, tasked with oversight, issued protests, but, as we all know, had no army and very little political will to enforce anything. As the Free City tilted into fascism, Poland became increasingly alarmed. Warsaw refused to relinquish its rights to the port and fortified nearby Westerplatte, a small peninsula granted to Poland as a military depot. Germany, meanwhile, pushed for Danzig's return to the Reich. In 1939, Hitler made his infamous demand, the annexation of Danzig, and the construction of a highway and railway corridor through the Polish corridor to link East Prussia with the rest of Germany. Poland obviously refused. To accept would be to surrender sovereignty, and potentially the city, and thus the access to international trade through the Baltic. To resist, however, was to risk war, and obviously, war came. At 4:45 a.m. on September 1st, 1939, the German battleship Schleswig-Holstein, which had arrived in Danzig's harbor days earlier under the pretext of ceremonial visit, opened fire on Westerplatte. Simultaneously, German troops, many of them local ethnic Germans who had been secretly armed and trained, attacked Polish installations throughout the city of Danzig. The defenders at Westerplatte, vastly outgunned, held out for 7 heroic days before surrendering. That same morning, Nazi troops stormed the Polish post office in Danzig, where a dozen Polish defenders fought to the last bullet, some committing suicide rather than surrender. In the final act of cruelty, the survivors were later executed as illegal combatants. With Danzig under Nazi control, Hitler declared the Free City dissolved and annexed it directly into the Third Reich. The League of Nations, powerless, never reconvened to protest. The city's brief experiment in autonomy was extinguished by force. In the following years, Danzig became fully integrated into the Nazi war machine. The port was militarized. Thousands of Jews and Poles were arrested, deported, or executed. The city's synagogues were destroyed. What had been a fragile crossroads became a node of brutality. As World War II neared its cataclysmic end in 1945, the Soviet Red Army advanced westward, determined to crush the Nazi regime. Danzig, now a heavily fortified city and Nazi stronghold, stood in the way. In March 1945, the Soviets launched a brutal assault. The city was subjected to heavy artillery, aerial bombardment, and street-by-street fighting. When the Red Army finally took the city, it lay in ruins. A large portion of the German population either fled or was forcibly expelled in the aftermath. In one of the most profound demographic shifts of the century, the city's population transformed almost overnight from majority German to majority Polish. With the war over, the Allies redrew the map of Europe again. Danzig was no longer a free city. It was now incorporated into the new communist-aligned People's Republic of Poland and renamed to its current name, Gdańsk. Its German past was erased. Street names were changed. German gravestones were actually removed. And over the next decades, Gdańsk became a symbol of Polish resistance, but also of how entire cities can be simply rewritten. And yet, memory proved persistent. The city that had been Danzig, cosmopolitan, contested, in between, retained traces of its old self. Architecture survived. Languages echoed in courtyards. And in a strange twist of fate, Gdańsk would once again become the site of historical transformation. In 1980, it was in Gdańsk shipyards that Lech Wałęsa and the Solidarity movement sparked a revolution against communism, one that would help bring down the Iron Curtain. Today, Gdańsk is a vibrant Polish city, proud of its identity, but also aware of its layered past. Museums explore its role in both world wars, and monuments commemorate Westerplatte and the fallen defenders of the Polish post office. Yet to walk its streets is to feel the weight of history, not just of war, but of identity, autonomy, and the fragility of peace. In the end, it begs a question. Can a multinational community survive in a world increasingly divided by flags? Well, for 20 short years, Danzig tried and failed. Thanks for listening.